My husband handed me divorce papers on our 25th anniversary. He said he'd found someone better, someone younger, more exciting, more alive. He told me I'd let myself go, that I was boring, that he deserved happiness. I signed without a fight. But 3 weeks later, his mistress called me at 2 in the morning, sobbing. What she told me made my blood run cold. My husband wasn't just a cheater. He was something far worse. I'd spent the entire day preparing for our 25th anniversary dinner. The table was set with our wedding china. Candles flickered in the dim light. I'd made his favourite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables, just like his mother used to make. I'd even bought a new dress. Nothing fancy, just something that made me feel a little less invisible. At 50, I didn't have the body I had at 25. But I'd tried. I really tried. Michael came home at 7, an hour late. He didn't apologize. Didn't even notice the table, the candles, the effort. He just walked past me into the living room and sat down on the couch with his phone. I stood in the doorway, watching him. My heart was already sinking. This wasn't new. The distance between us had been growing for months, maybe years. But I kept hoping, kept trying, kept believing that if I just worked harder, things would get better. They didn't. He looked up from his phone and saw me standing there. Something flickered across his face. Not guilt, more like irritation. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. My stomach dropped before he even said a word. He tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. It landed with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the silence. He told me he wanted a divorce. Just like that. No preamble. Just cold, hard facts, delivered like a business transaction. He said he'd met someone. Her name was Jessica. She was 32, worked in his office, and made him feel alive again. She was everything I wasn't. Young, energetic, fun, exciting. He said I'd let myself go, that I'd become boring, that all I did was cook and clean and talk about our kids, that he'd been unhappy for years and deserved to be happy. Every word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I sat at the kitchen table that night, with the papers spread out in front of me. The candles had burned down to nothing. The food sat cold and untouched. I read through every page. He was being fair, I supposed. The house would be sold, and we'd split everything 50-50. After 25 years, I'd walk away with half. But how do you split a life in half? How do you divide memories, dreams, all those years of trying? I could have fought. Could have gotten a lawyer and made his life difficult. But I was tired. So tired of fighting for a marriage he'd already abandoned. So I signed. Right there at the kitchen table, with a pen that kept skipping because my hands were shaking so badly. I signed away 25 years like it meant nothing. Because to him, it didn't. Michael moved out 3 days later. He'd already had an apartment lined up. He'd planned everything. Jessica came to help him with the last load. I watched from the window as she pulled up in a shiny red car. She was everything he'd said. Young, beautiful, dressed in tight jeans, showing off her flat stomach. She laughed at something he said as they loaded boxes. He kissed her right there in our driveway. Not a quick peck. A real kiss. My daughter Sarah called that evening. She was crying, asking what happened, why I hadn't told her things were so bad. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain that I hadn't known either? I was starting to adjust to my new reality, starting to accept that this was my life now. Alone at 50 with half a life behind me and no idea what lay ahead. And then my phone rang at 2 in the morning. A woman's voice came through the line. Young, shaking, crying so hard she could barely speak. She asked if I was Michael's wife. Ex-wife, I corrected. She said her name was Jessica. My blood turned to ice. Jessica was sobbing uncontrollably. She kept apologizing, saying she didn't know who else to call, that she was scared. She told me she'd made a mistake, that she was sorry for everything, that she hadn't known what kind of man he really was. She said the first month was perfect. Then things changed. He became controlling, wanted to know where she was every minute, got angry if she went out with friends, started criticizing her appearance. Last week, he'd grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises when she came home late from work. Tonight, he'd shoved her against a wall because dinner wasn't ready. She was calling from a gas station bathroom. She'd grabbed her purse and run. She had nowhere to go. As I listened, memories started surfacing. Things I'd dismissed. Times he'd isolated me from friends. How he'd discouraged me from working. How he'd controlled our finances. The constant criticism about my weight, my clothes, my hair. It had been subtle. So subtle I hadn't seen it as abuse. I'd seen it as marriage. But listening to Jessica describe the escalation, I realized something horrifying. He'd done the same thing to me. Just slowly. Over 25 years instead of 2 months. I told Jessica to come to my house. She arrived an hour later, a small bag in hand, eyes red from crying. We sat at my kitchen table, and she showed me what she'd found. Documents hidden in a box in his closet. Divorce papers. But not ours. Papers from a woman named Catherine. Divorced 10 years before I met him. And papers from a woman named Linda. Divorced 3 years before Catherine. She'd called both numbers, both disconnected, but she'd found Catherine on social media, and Catherine had told her about Linda, and Linda had told her about 2 others. Michael had been married 5 times before me, 5 times, and I'd never known. Every marriage followed the same pattern: sweep them off their feet, marry them, slowly isolate and control them. Then, when they started pushing back, or when he got bored, find someone new. I was wife number 6. Jessica was going to be number 7. Jessica had Catherine's number. I called her the next morning. We talked for 2 hours. Catherine told me how Michael had seemed perfect at first, how he'd proposed after 6 months, how he'd slowly taken over every aspect of her life, made her quit her job, isolated her from family, criticized her until she believed she was worthless. She'd left after 5 years when he started getting physical. Not hitting, not quite, but pushing, grabbing, intimidating. She gave me Linda's number. Linda's story was worse. Michael had broken her completely. When he finally left her for someone else, she'd had a breakdown. Spent 6 months in a psychiatric facility. Linda told me about the others: Rebecca, Amanda, Karen. 6 women, 6 lives destroyed. I asked Linda why she'd never gone to the police. She laughed bitterly, said she had. They'd told her being a bad husband wasn't a crime. Jessica was staying in my guest room. We sat up late that night talking about Michael, about the patterns, about how he'd managed to fool so many women. Jessica wanted to leave town, start over somewhere he couldn't find her. I understood. Running seemed easiest. But I was tired of running, tired of being a victim, tired of Michael winning. I called Catherine and Linda back, told them I wanted to do something that would finally make him pay. We decided to meet, all of us, to compare notes, to pool our resources, to figure out if there was any way to stop him. We met at a coffee shop 2 days later. Catherine drove in from 2 states over. Linda took a day off work. 4 women connected by one monster. We spent 6 hours comparing stories. The similarities were chilling. He used the same lines, the same techniques, the same progression. He targeted women in their late 20s to early 30s, successful but insecure, ready to settle down, wanting to believe in love. He'd sweep them off their feet, marry them fast, then spend years breaking them down. When they were thoroughly destroyed, he'd leave for someone new. Catherine had kept financial records. Linda had kept emails. Jessica had recorded some recent arguments. I had the divorce papers showing the pattern. Individually, none of it was enough. But together it painted a picture. Catherine knew a lawyer who specialized in fraud and financial abuse cases. Her name was Diana Chen. We met with her the following week. She listened without interrupting, took pages of notes, asked pointed questions. When we finished, she was quiet for a long moment. She said most of what he'd done was technically legal. Being emotionally abusive wasn't a crime. Hiding assets was hard to prove. But the pattern mattered. 6 wives, 6 identical patterns. If we could prove he'd systematically defrauded all of us, that might be fraud on a larger scale. It would be expensive, time-consuming, emotionally draining, and there was no guarantee we'd win. But it was a chance. While Diana worked on the legal angle, I decided to pursue another approach. I was done hiding. I started a blog, titled it The Wives of Michael Harrison, and laid out the whole story. Not just mine, all of ours. I didn't use our real names, but I used his. Every detail, his patterns, his techniques, his lies. I posted financial documents showing hidden accounts, the timeline of his 6 marriages, quotes from divorce papers. I ended with a warning. If you're dating Michael Harrison, read this. Learn from us. Don't become wife number 7. Within a week, it had gone viral. Thousands of views became hundreds of thousands. Women started commenting, sharing their own stories. The media picked it up. Local news, then regional, then national. And then something unexpected happened. A woman named Elena contacted me through the blog. She'd seen the story. She was engaged to Michael. She'd met him 4 months ago. He'd told her I was his first wife, that we'd grown apart. He'd proposed 3 weeks ago. She'd thought he was perfect. Until she saw the blog. She met with us, joined our group, shared her conversations with Michael, which matched our experiences perfectly. She called off the engagement, blocked his number, moved in with her sister. Michael showed up at her work anyway, made a scene. Security escorted him out. She filed a restraining order and gave us recordings of him threatening her, saying he'd ruin her, destroy her reputation. Those threats were finally something concrete, something prosecutable. Diana got a court date. We had enough for a judge to freeze Michael's assets pending investigation. He showed up with his expensive lawyer, confident, smug, his face when he saw us all sitting there. Catherine, Linda, me, Jessica, Elena, all of us in a row. Diana presented our case, the pattern of marriages, the hidden assets, the threats, the systematic fraud. His lawyer argued it was circumstantial, that Michael was just unlucky in love. The judge listened to everything, looked through documents, watched recordings, and froze his accounts, ordered him to surrender his passport, set a trial date. Michael's face went red. He started to stand up, but his lawyer pulled him back down. As we left the courtroom, I saw him staring at me, not with anger, with shock, like he couldn't believe I'd actually fought back. The investigation took 8 months. The FBI got involved. They found even more. Accounts we didn't know about. Money hidden in family members' names. More women came forward. Not ex-wives, but girlfriends he'd defrauded. Women he'd borrowed money from and never repaid. The charges grew: wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft. The trial lasted 3 weeks. We all testified, told our stories, showed the pattern. The prosecution brought in a psychologist who testified about patterns of narcissistic abuse, how predators target, isolate, exploit, and discard victims. Michael's defense was weak. He claimed we'd all known about the accounts, that the money was legally his. The jury didn't believe him. Guilty on 17 counts of fraud, 3 counts of identity theft, 2 counts of wire fraud, 15 years in federal prison, ordered to pay restitution to all his ex-wives. I watched him get handcuffed and led away. He didn't look at any of us, just stared straight ahead like he still couldn't believe he'd lost. It's been 2 years since the trial. I'm 52 now. Living in the same house, but it feels different. It feels like mine. The restitution money was substantial. Turned out Michael had been hiding nearly $2 million. Split among 6 women, it gave each of us enough to rebuild. Catherine went back to school, got her master's degree. She's a therapist now, specializing in abuse survivors. Linda started a non-profit helping women escape financial abuse. Jessica finished her degree and moved across the country. She's engaged to someone who treats her well. Elena wrote a book about her experience. It became a bestseller. I updated the blog regularly during the trial. After, I turned it into a resource. Warning signs of financial abuse. How to protect yourself. How to escape. How to rebuild. It gets thousands of visits a month. Women email me their stories. Thank me for warning them. I'm in therapy now. Working through 25 years of manipulation I didn't recognize as manipulation. My therapist says Michael targeted my insecurities, that he slowly reshaped my reality until I believed I was worthless without him. I'm starting to believe her. My kids struggled with everything, finding out their father was a serial predator, that he was in prison. But Sarah moved back to town. She stops by twice a week. We're rebuilding our relationship. I started dating again. Nothing serious. But I'm learning what healthy relationships look like, what respect feels like. It's strange, foreign, but good. A filmmaker contacted me last year. She wanted to make a documentary about the case. I was hesitant, but Catherine convinced me. She said other women needed to hear this. We all participated, sat for interviews, shared our stories on camera. The documentary premiered 3 months ago. Won awards. Got picked up by a major streaming service. I get recognized sometimes. Women stop me in grocery stores. Thank me. Tell me their own stories. Tell me they got out because they saw themselves in us. That makes it worth it. All of it. If I could go back and tell my 25-year-old self anything, I'd say this. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. I'd tell her that love shouldn't hurt, shouldn't diminish you, shouldn't make you smaller. I'd tell her that being alone is better than being with someone who makes you feel worthless. But I can't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward. I think about all the years I lost. 25 years with a man who saw me as something to control and exploit. But I also think about what came after. The women I've helped, the lives we saved. Elena, who didn't become wife number 7. The hundreds of women who've emailed saying they recognized the patterns and left. Maybe those 25 years weren't wasted. Maybe they were preparation for stopping him, for helping others. I'd rather have those years back. But if I can't, at least they meant something in the end. It's been 5 years since Michael handed me those divorce papers. 5 years since my world fell apart and rebuilt itself into something better. I'm 55 now. I live in a smaller place closer to the city. It's just right for me. I still run the blog, still get emails from women asking for help. The non-profit Linda started has expanded. We have chapters in 12 states now. Catherine's therapy practice is thriving. Jessica got married last year. Elena's on her third book. We still meet once a year. All 7 of us. Michael's survivors. We share updates, support each other, celebrate how far we've come. Michael is still in prison. He'll be eligible for parole in 8 years. We've all written letters opposing it. Linda started a petition. Over 50,000 people have signed. I don't think about him much anymore. When I do, it's not with anger, just acknowledgement. He was part of my story, a painful chapter, but not the ending. Sarah had a baby last year, my first grandchild, a little girl. I look at her and think about the world we're building, one where patterns of abuse are recognized early, where predators like Michael don't get away with it for decades. I started dating someone seriously 6 months ago. His name is David. He's kind, patient, secure in himself. He doesn't need to control me to feel powerful. It's still scary sometimes, trusting again. But I'm learning. Last week, I got an email from a woman in her 20s. She'd recognized the patterns from my blog in her new boyfriend. Got out after 3 months instead of 3 years or 25 years. She thanked me for sharing my story, for warning her. I wrote back and told her she saved herself. I just showed her the map. That's what we do now. All 7 of us. We show women the map, the warning signs, the patterns, the escape routes. Because there are men like Michael everywhere. Men who see relationships as conquests, women as possessions, love as a tool for control. But there are also survivors everywhere. Women who got out, who rebuilt, who refused to let their past define their future. I thought my life ended at 50 when Michael left me. Thought I was too old, too broken, too used up to start over. I was wrong. My life didn't end. It just finally began.